I'm here with Georgia U.S. Senator David Perdue. Senator Perdue, thank you for joining me on FYNTV.com. Last time we were together, you were riding all through North Georgia on a bus and the true outsider. Tell us just a little bit, just take a minute to tell our viewers what it's been like since you've been up there and trying to maintain that true outsider status in Senate.
You know, it's the easiest thing I've done. I mean, frankly, I was an outsider when I got into the race, and once I got elected and got up there, just my position being a Fortune 500 CEO makes me an outsider in the first right. But secondly, is I'm there to get results. I mean, I went there and got involved in the first place to try to get results, to try to change the direction of the country. A lot of people in Congress are there worried about how to get reelected, and if that's the driving force, then we don't get results, and that's what the problem is in my mind. That's what causes gridlock. So it's been very frustrating, but I knew it would be. But we've had an impact already. There's only one of us in the Senate who's been a Fortune 500 CEO. So when I talk about things like tax changes and regulation changes and things like that, there's a platform that I'm being given to have some impact on that, and I'm grateful for that, and I'm stepping through and doing that.
Let me start this direction, Senator. The Senate Armed Services Committee. The other night I listened to President Donald Trump's speech of a new direction in Afghanistan. Let me ask you, after 16 years, thousands of young men and women have lost their life there, billions of dollars have been spent, hundreds of billions. What about the President's direction now in Afghanistan and the Secretary of State, Tillerson and Mattis, Secretary of Defense? What about the direction now do you feel comfortable with, or do you support and think we can accomplish what we want, the outcome?
Well, first of all, in my career, I lived in Asia. Actually had an office and worked a lot in Lahore, Pakistan, on the eastern side of Pakistan. I've made a couple trips there since being in the Senate. I just got back from Afghanistan and Pakistan. What we've got going right now with this president is a regional solution and a long-term strategy. That's what we've been missing for 16 years. We went in there to deny radical Islamic jihadists from having a base from which they could do damage in the United States. If one thing we learned in 9/11 was that we cannot protect the United States just within the borders of the United States. We have to step out and deny these Islamic radical extremists havens where they can develop a capability to harm us here at home. We have not been focused on that mission over the last 16 years. And what these people are beginning to talk about now, General Mattis, even with John Kelly's help, as well as the President, we now are moving toward a regional solution that includes India, Pakistan, and Afghanistan, that deals with Pashtuns, that deals with the Kashmiri issue between India and Pakistan. It deals with a Haqqani network that gives support for the Taliban in Afghanistan. So it's a very complicated equation, and this is the first time I've seen an attempt to have a regional long-term solution to the objective that we have, and that is to simply deny Islamic extremists a base from which they can do harm in the United States.
So after 16 years of what we've been through in Afghanistan, you have actually see something that you think is in the right direction and has a plan. There's a plan in place that we've not seen yet that Mattis will implement.
We have never seen in 16 years the real strategy of how to win. Nobody defined what winning is. And I believe we're seeing now that the denial of a base operation and a capability to extremists to do harm in the United States, that's the mission. And today it's in Afghanistan, but we cannot in the United States, and this is one of the problems I have being on armed services, we can't sit back and on the disinvestment that we've seen in the last 8 years in our military and expect our military to be able to do everything that we needed to do in this very dangerous world. Look, the world, in my opinion, is more dangerous right now than any time in my lifetime. And I believe the military is at the weakest point it's been in my lifetime. And the reason is, in the last 8 years, just like in the 70s under Jimmy Carter, in the 90s under Bill Clinton, under Barack Obama, the government disinvested in the military. Today, we have the smallest army since World War II, the smallest Navy since World War I, and the oldest and smallest Air Force ever. And frankly, to recap it, to rebuild it, is going to take hundreds of billions of dollars that we don't have. Every dime we spend on our military today, every dime we spend on our veterans, and every dime we spend on domestic discretionary programs, building roads, health care, and all those things, is borrowed money.
You know, Senator, I've heard you speak along with many others about the victory, I'll call it the victory of getting Neil Gorsuch on the Supreme Court. And that was a major promise that the president made the American people. And I think there's a couple promises that he did make that he's the reason he's president today. The Supreme Court, security on our southern border, tax reform, there's a list. And not to leave it as last, but the most pressing recent one is to repeal Obamacare. In that vein, Neil Gorsuch was 51 votes. Reconciliation, change the rule to 51 votes. The president is very clear, Twitter, interviews, that he's asking the Senate Majority Leader, Mitch McConnell, to change the rule to 51 votes. Where are you on that?
Well, I actually originated that conversation with the president and with the leadership. I'm a business guy. I focus on results. And when the system is tied up and creates gridlock like we have up there right now, something has to change. I went back and looked at the original rules of the United States Senate. There were 6 pages. 51% decided most all issues except for 2. It took 67% of the votes to ratify a treaty and 67% of the votes in the Senate to impeach a president. That's it. And the filibuster rule was there. That meant that you could stand up and delay a vote temporarily by filibustering, by talking physically. That was first used in the 1850s behind the slavery issue. It was abused in the 90s, and in 1913, the Senate actually, to speed things up, put a cloture rule in to say that if 2/3 of us agree, we'll stop the debate and we'll move on to a vote. Well, that didn't work, and in 1975, they changed it to 60 votes. So this is not a historical precedent, and it is one of the reasons why I believe that if you are willing to do the nuclear option on the judges, which the Democrats did and the Republicans just did, if you're willing to do reconciliation, then you have no reason not to change the filibuster rule. That's my logic. Now, it changes some precedent that we have since 1975, but today, frankly, I think we're not going to get the results this president wants unless we do that.
What do you think about when you go back in September? You led the way with several other senators. You led the way in a press conference and being very public. Don't go home. Don't go home. No recess until we get the job done. And obviously, sorry to say, not yourself, but the body did not get the job done. We didn't repeal Obamacare as promised. You go back, you have 17 days, you have you got to raise the debt ceiling. President the other night alludes to may shut down the government if he doesn't have funding for the wall. Tell us where we really stand with that when you get back in September.
Well, first of all, I got 10 senators, and we could have gotten more if we needed to, but we did a press conference and said to the leadership, we need to stay here in August because we've got the debt ceiling, we've got the budget reconciliation, and we have to fund the government before September 30th. And there was just no time to do it. And so we said, we need to stay here. I'm a business guy. I mean, you would never go back to state and do other things in work weeks if you had that kind of agenda that you had to get done. So to his credit, Mitch McConnell agreed. He said, okay, based on that, we'll stay here at least 2 weeks and possibly the whole time to get this stuff done. Then Chuck Schumer came and negotiated, giving confirmations approval on 72 people 2 weeks ago on a Thursday, the last day we were there, in order to get out early. That's why we're not up there today. And that's how perverse this situation is. We need to be there working on the debt ceiling. We need to be there working on the budget. We need to be there working on funding the government. Do you realize that the budget system is broken? You and I have talked about that repeatedly. But over the last 43 years since the Budget Act was put in place, the Senate has only appropriated and voted for 2.5 bills a year. They have to appropriate 12 bills a year, 12 different functions in order to fund the government. And it's just insane. That would never happen in any other world. Other than
do you support that the funding, the appropriations should have money for the southern border
Absolutely.
security?
Look, what this president's already demonstrated, illegal crossings of the southern border are down by more than 50% already.
Absolutely, yes.
And we haven't even built the wall yet. And so what we've done is we've hired extra officers. He's moving to get more strength in the courts to have the ability to prosecute. We're trying to get Kate's Law passed. We're trying to get the sanctuary cities things passed. The president's pushing this. He has done exactly what he said he would do. He knew that the security issue in the United States was a big issue. And that security on that southern border had to be done. So he's moving on that, and I fully support that now. That should be funded in this budget.
I don't like to reference some of the publications, and I like to cut through the noise and the smoke that's out there. I'll just ask you direct, when you get back, do you think the Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell and the President can work together and you can get 51 votes to move some things along? Do you think that can be solved? Because right now it just sounds like things are not working very well there.
Well, this president doesn't fit the traditional box that the career politicians expect in a president. He wants results. He's not an ideologue. And he doesn't care about the rules of the Senate. He cares about getting results. That's what people back here, this group we just met with today, that's what they care about. I'm hopeful that they can, because we've got a leader in the White House that will actually sign things into law now. If we pass them in the Senate, this guy will sign them. And so we've got to deal with health care when we get back. We've got to deal with the debt ceiling. But the big thing that's looming in addition to health care is tax. We've got to get tax done this year, and that's a heavy lift, because after September 30th, after funding the government, then we move on to tax. We only have 44 working days before the end of the calendar year. And the reason that's important is so business leaders and all can get some confidence that the President and the Senate and Congress are actually going to change things and make us competitive with the rest of the world in this tax issue.
I know our time is short and we have to wrap this up. Your background in business, as we close, give us some positive highlights. I get tired of hearing all the negatives. Give us some positive highlights that have taken place in business, small business, what small business owners out there, if they can get past the noise of the TV, they could expect that you're working on.
Well, let me give you the big one. Steve Mnuchin says in a hearing in budget that he can address 70 to 80% of the problems in Dodd-Frank. That's huge for small banks, because there are $2 trillion tied up on the balance sheets of small and regional banks unnecessarily under Dodd-Frank. Another one is we've created 1 million jobs so far this year, and we really haven't, and that's largely on the presumption that we're going to continue the regulatory work that we're doing. Some 800 rules have been changed so far, and we're just getting started. The presumption is we're going to change these tax rules and get competitive with the rest of the world. We changed the law that allows the head of the VA to deal with people who are not performing, and to date, over 500 people have been let go for cause for non-performance in the Veterans Administration. So sooner or later, you're going to start getting better performance there. So there's reason to believe consumer confidence is up. I think it's a 16-year high now. CEO confidence is a 20-year high, because they see this president pushing Congress in a direction that takes off the stifling things that the Obama administration did to shut down this economy. You realize the economic growth of the Obama administration years, those 8 years, was the lowest in our history. And he's re-engaged, this president, President Trump, is re-engaging with the rest of the world. I think that's the most positive thing I can tell you. And he's committed to rebuild the military over time. And that's what he promised to do.
Last question, media groups out there, some of them are trying to create the impression that Republicans are moving away from the president, that he's losing support within the party, several senators, members of the House. You yourself, where do you stand on supporting the President of the United States today?
100%. What he's talking about, executing and implementing right now, is what I ran on. Grow the economy, re-engage with the rest of the world, rebuild the military, solve this health care debacle that's collapsing under its own weight, fix the tax system to make us more competitive with the rest of the world. This president knows that we have a debt crisis. He knows that. He knows we have a global security crisis. He's moving in that direction. The first step is to get the economy going, and he did that through regulatory changes, which we're trying to do, and we're being pretty effective about that right now. The tax changes that will come this year, hopefully, will actually be a big help in continuing to do that. And then I think if we can get this health care thing done, that'll give people confidence that we're moving in the right direction. This is a president that's moving at a business pace, not a bureaucratic pace. And the reason I support him is this. He's just strong. He's nobody's choir boy. Let's be clear. But neither was Winston Churchill or Eisenhower, people of destiny, people of history. I think we've got a guy now that can actually change the direction of the country, break some eggs in this establishment in Washington, and get something done. And that's why I fully support it.
Senator David Perdue, I just want to thank you this morning as for actually what we see here in Georgia as you keeping your campaign promises. Yep. And we thank you as a true outsider. Appreciate it.
Thank you, man.
For joining us on FYNTV.com.